Welcome to Identifying Skill Objectives, the Why, for eStudies 2016. This is Lynn Fairchild-Hawks here, and I'm going to take you through this presentation to help you do your assignment for the skill objectives. So by this point, you're really familiar with your Sakai course. Whether you're inheriting it from someone else or you built it yourself, you know the goals sections. You know that buried in that syllabus, in the goal area, you find all the content and skill objectives that you need. And you've been looking at your parent-facing syllabus, the sample syllabus, telling you, okay, these are the basic objectives I've had. And now TIP is telling you, please identify clear skill objectives that scaffold through week 7 and give us a list by January 17th. So what do we mean by clear? And what exactly do we mean by skill objectives that scaffold? So what we're talking about here is you figuring out the difference between the biggest and the smallest skills, macro versus micro. That you truly understand the relationship between all your skills, that there's an order and a hierarchy. It's not just sort of a nice grocery list or a potpourri. So these little Russian doll images are really wonderful because macro skills often hide or imply micro skills. Let's take a quick example here. Let's say that one of the really neat projects you want your students to do is design a study to investigate causes of illness outbreaks at the state fair. Well, designing a study is a task that's quite a skill objective, all right? You're designing an experimental study. It's an epidemiological study. Well, hidden within that are tons of micro skills. In order to do this, a student needs to know how to distinguish between independent and dependent variables, quantitative and qualitative data. You can just see, looking at this list, what are all the buried micro skills within that larger macro skill objective. Or if you're in an English class or any class where you're asking students to craft an argument with logical reasoning, relevant evidence, accurate, credible sources, here are just some micro skills that would be needed. And notice that I've labeled them by the Bloom's taxonomy hierarchy, just for your edification and also understanding of how that all fits together. So you might want to pause the presentation and just take a moment to consume this as well, or the prior slide if you're in a STEM class. But what we care most about at TIP is that the skills that you choose are really about doing real-world work. So this Bloom's taxonomy image on the side here really is the hierarchy of skills that we want kids to practice, all of them, and as many as possible simultaneously and in an order too, depending on what kids need to learn first. But ask yourself, as you're making this master list of macro and micro skills, where do the roles of your discipline, where do professionals have to analyze, create, synthesize, and evaluate? What type of real-world tasks do they have to do, and how could your students be practicing and replicating them? So what you're basically crafting is you are crafting a skill objective list of specific actions, i.e. key verbs, borrowed from Bloom's taxonomy. You want to lead with great verbs. So you want to sort through all the piles of words and figure out what are the things my students are going to do. They're going to design, they're going to analyze, they're going to distinguish, they're going to create. So obviously we're hanging out at the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy as much as possible. Students do need to be able to identify, they need to be able to comprehend and apply in the lower levels in order to do these higher level things. But the final bigger summative assessments you'll be crafting will definitely want to hang out in the upper realms. So you're choosing those high level verbs. This is a resource. I just wanted to show you a real quick picture. You'll find it in the pages of this module. And this is a great list of verbs that you can just borrow from as you're trying to figure out that analysis, synthesis, and evaluation section of your course and how you can borrow those verbs. So don't forget you have this as a resource. Here are some other verbs, just a quick glance. You can refer back to this presentation if you need some great synonyms for analysis as far as beginning a skill objective with one of these words. Or maybe you need some synonymous verbs for synthesis or creation. Well, here's a bunch that you might use. Or how about for evaluation? Here's some more that would work well. So another thing that skill objectives are is they are what I would call success criteria. They are going to end up on your rubrics as criteria you're going to use to judge your students' products and performances. You're going to use these same skill objectives to tell your kids, hey, this is what quality looks like in a product or performance. And in each week of eStudies, there should be one core assignment, whether it's formative or summative, that has some kind of rubric with some kind of success criteria, otherwise known as skill objectives. So this is where we're headed in preterm. This is just at a glance. This winter, you're going to identify macro and micro skills. That's your first deliverable on January 17th. And then right after that, you're going to build an outline for at least 2 summative assessments for the term. So in 7 weeks, your students will do 2 summative, and then they'll do some preparatory formative assessments that require demonstration of those skill objectives. You're also going to create some rubrics. You're going to do some rough drafts in the winter and finalize these in the spring using the really neat Canvas tools for this. And we're going to also, meanwhile, at the main office, part of our academic team, we're going to be building you some rubrics that you can repurpose and use so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then finally, this summer, when the students are here, you will assess in Canvas using those rubrics, and that will feed right to the gradebook. What's that gradebook going to look like? Well, we'll do a training in the spring, but just a quick, cool preview. Do you see where the arrow is pointing to learning outcome? That is synonymous with skill objectives. So this is where you're headed. You're going to actually be able to see at a glance in a color-coded fashion on a 1 to 4 scale, whether your student is in exemplary, successful mode, or whether the student is actually, more in an insufficient or well below mastery mode. And so it's a really neat system using color coding to tell you where your kids are with their skill objectives. So no matter what the assignment, if it's a writing prompt, discussion, quiz, whatever, you will be able to see where they are with those learning outcomes. Just a couple things that might hold you up as you begin the skill objectives list. You may be overwhelmed by your content because maybe you have a really big book or you're inheriting several books for this course. And you feel like, well, gosh, Tip ordered them, they're sending them to the kids in the mail, I better darn well use every single page. And another thing that might hang you up and prevent you from choosing skill objectives where you're feeling overwhelmed by the choice process is maybe you have all these massive rubrics and checklists that were used in the course last year and you feel like just almost obligated to reuse them. Like, okay, they're here in the house, I got to move them to the new house. You may also feel like your students, they've seen rubrics before and they know what skills are being taught in this class. They kind of know the drill. I don't have to explain everything to them. Another misunderstanding that might be hampering you a little bit is you feel like, well, gosh, I don't have a lot of time now. I don't want to think about rubrics and skill objectives in great detail. I'll figure it out while I'm grading later. So actually, let's explode a few of these misunderstandings. Just because Tip orders the books doesn't mean you have to use every single page. Just use enough of it to justify the purchase and sending. So excerpt thoughtfully, and we will be happy on a main office level. Those beautiful big rubrics that have been built, move parts of them to the new house, chunk them, scaffold them through the course all the way through week 7, but you don't have to start your course week 1 with a rubric that's full of 20 skill objectives. In fact, that's asking too much of students. So you want to be thinking about that. And most importantly, the reason why we're thinking of skill objectives now and planning for those rubrics now in a rough draft kind of way is our kids won't know what we want when they're doing these products and performances till we tell them what our goals are, which is our skill objectives, until we tell them that those are our success criteria and we offer models and samples of that quality work. So you can be building in your mind now rough drafts of just little rubrics with a couple skill objectives represented. You'll get those all worked out by the spring. But make the time now to think really carefully about these skill objectives, and you will find this summer your grading is going to be so much more efficient. And first of all, you'll know what and why you're assigning it. Your students and parents will too. You can start creating and finding examples in anonymous models of student work so that they'll create work that's better. And then your grading is going to be faster and more efficient. It'll also allow you to differentiate instruction. We've got a really heterogeneous population in this gifted pool of kids. And knowing the macro versus micro skills in every kind of task that you do will really help you target and differentiate and individualize for certain students. So, a couple things as you're making this list. Do you get the relationship among all the skills you teach in your course? Do you know which are micro, which are macro? Do you know which is the best order for learning? This is going to require some real thoughtfulness. Just get a cup of coffee, get your full list of skills, and really think about relationship and ordering. Should you consolidate some? Could some become a little bit higher in the hierarchy, raise them to a higher level? Should you subordinate others? And, how much is it realistically going to take students to get and master all these skills? Now, obviously, not all of them are going to master it by the time they come out of the course, but those are the kinds of questions you want to grapple with. Remember, less is more in 2016. What is truly necessary as we move houses? Maybe you only have 3 macro skills for a 7-week term, because remember, like the Russian dolls, macro hides micro. And like I said earlier, don't bring too many into week 1. Don't have really long rubrics and really long skill objective lists. Or if you're inheriting a course and you have a first major core assignment and you can't find a rubric anywhere and you've asked us, then you have a wonderful wide open field to start building scaffolded skill objectives. Think about the luxury you have. There are no transcript requirements, no state or national standards, so you don't have to rush through. And you can just make sure students learn this content just in time, not just in case. So do you notice here we're not talking at all about content objectives? We're only talking about what students will be able to do by the end of the course, not all the stuff they will know. So rigor really will come from you getting clear at this moment the macro-micro relationship of your skills so that you can challenge all of our students at varying levels. So here's your task. By January 17th, give us 3 to 4 macro skills that students will show mastery of by the end of the term. What will they be able to do? And, in a lot of cases, many of you will have to reduce because you may have been giving so many different types of assignments with so many skills embedded in them that you really don't need all of them. We're here to help you. The academic coordinators are here. Jamie and I are here. Give us a call. Send us an email. Start with Megan and Corey. Let them know where you need help and support. Thanks for listening.